I'm Rosemary Parkinson.
Katri Kanninen. And we are going to talk about the middle of the therapy.
So the middle section starts when you've completed reformulation. You have a shared understanding of what the difficulties are through the reformulation letter, through the diagram. And you also have the client's goals for therapy. When we've talked as well, we've said that as therapists we have goal for the client to become their own therapist.
And the middle section is actually the most creative part of therapy, where you can really do different things, depending on the client, depending on your own knowledge and skills. And we are going to talk about the 5 principles that guide the work in the middle phase that I have written about together with another Finnish colleague. And the first principle is tailoring to the client.
And that's where I come in with the idea of ZPD, that in Ryle's work he's talked about the zone of proximal development. And the wonderful thing about the middle section is that you can work in any way that you want to, because you're working with what the client needs at that time. So if the client needs to go this next step and another client needs to go another next step, then you work with that wherever they are.
Yeah, and even though we have finished the reformulation phase, it's not that we throw away the reformulation. It's guiding our actions and choices of clinical choices all through.
Yeah.
So here it's actually all these different principles are lying on top of therapeutic relationship. And all of these principles, even if we tell 5 of them, are not following each other. They are alternating with each other all the time. So the second one is having an observational attitude or approach.
Yes, and one we were thinking about in terms of the observational attitude is that at this stage, because the client and you have this shared understanding, then they start bringing in examples that their daily lives. And when they bring them into the room, the 2 of you then can look together at the diagram that might be between you, think about the reformulation letter, and discuss their daily difficulties in terms of those, explaining them in terms of the diagram and the reciprocal roles that you've got there. And by doing that, you start to develop more helpful reciprocal roles.
Yes, so we are taking together on reflective positioning. We are taking a helicopter perspective. And in the maps, we even do it so concretely, we often have the observing eye.
Yes, actually drawn onto the map, written in the corner, so that you can see that you are looking at what's happening from a distance and therefore getting some perspective.
Yeah, and at the same time we are hoping that this observing positioning is something that the client identifies with and something that gets internalized and becomes client's own ability.
Completely, yes, so that they can do that for themselves after the therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the third principle is structuring approach. It's really making sense of what's in the client's story.
And one of the things that I was thinking of in terms of that was how the diagram in CAT enables you to be much more open about addressing the therapeutic relationship. In other therapies, because you're just client and therapist without this mediating tool, it's much harder to talk about the transference and the countertransference. But using the diagram, we can say, oh, I wonder if, what's happening now is this procedure in action. I wonder if we're getting stuck in this reciprocal role. This is what's happening for me. It sounds like that's what's happening for you, and both of us can be doing that. And suddenly we have this way of using what's in the room right there with us in this really alive way.
And at the same time, the word structuring sounds a bit cool or distancing, but this is exactly how you are describing that. It's a lively way of linking what happens here and now to clients' past relational patterns.
Yeah, yeah, definitely the past relational ones, the present relational ones outside the room, and then of course the room itself.
Yeah, we are looking at the repetition.
Yeah, yeah.
And this structuring approach alternates with, of course, observation, but also with fourth principle, which is the experiential approach. That usually by this phase, it's starting to be possible for the client to approach more deeply underlying emotions.
And then in the sessions, in this middle section, because we've already named these emotions, they'll be in the letter, they'll be in the diagram, they'll be in what we've talked about. But we have a safe enough space now in the therapeutic relationship, in the room, that they can start to actually experience them, and we can be there with them. This can be a safe way of them experiencing those feelings, which they might have split off or not allowed themselves to feel. They come to feeling them, and then through doing that with us in this safe space, they can learn how to look after themselves. So they can go away and allow those feelings in and look after themselves at that point.
Again, we are looking at the internalization, that we are hoping that the therapist voice becomes a part of clients' polyphonic voices.
Completely, yes. And also the experience of being in the room is one they can take away from them and remember, oh yes, it was okay there, this is what happened, and I coped with it, and I now know I can do that on my own.
And part of it, we were also wondering, together with Rosemary, that some of the clients have more difficulties reaching the emotions that are maybe a bit intellectualizing, and some of them need more help. So in CAT we often use chair work or other trauma techniques at this phase.
And maybe some body work, so bringing it into the body, allowing people to experience themselves in different ways.
Yes. And the fifth principle is working towards finding exits, alternating new strategies.
Yes, and when we were talking earlier, we were thinking about how, although the client might have overall goals, and we might have a goal for them to become their own therapist. One of the things which we've both observed in client work is that through all the work we're doing in the reformulation phase and in these 5 principles, change is happening anyway. And that clients often come into the room reporting that they have done things differently. And then we will be saying with them, wow, that's different. How is that different? Why is it different? Let's work out what happened there. And then we can draw out the new reciprocal roles, the new, more helpful, healthy reciprocal roles, draw the exits onto the diagram, and embrace with them that this change has happened organically.
Sometimes the goals that we have set are very specific and maybe even behavioral, but mostly in CAT, actually, our goals are quite relational and dialogical, telling about what is the change towards ourselves, or what is the change that's happening in our way of relating to things, work, outside relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.